Good morning everyone. On behalf of Don Bosco College of Engineering Goa, myself, Professor Yashidas Muthu, IEEE Student Branch Counselor, welcome you all for the concluding session of Tech Insight webinar series organized by IEEE DBC Student Branch in association with IEEE Bombay section. As said by Dave Waters, machine learning will automate jobs that most people thought could only be done by people. Today, we have amongst us Dr. Shaunak Dey, all the way from California, who will deliver his session on industrial machine learning, considerations and opportunities. I now request IEEE Student Branch Joint Treasurer, Mr. Suyog Borkar, to kindly introduce the speaker for today's webinar.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. This is Suyog Borkar, Joint Treasurer of IEEE Student Branch of Don Bosco College of Engineering. I would like to introduce you all to our speaker for the day, Dr. Shaunak Dey. Dr. Shaunak Dey received his Bachelor in Engineering degree in Electronics Engineering from the University of Mumbai, and he graduated as a gold medalist. He then received his PhD degree in Remote Sensing Image Analysis at the Center of Studies in Resources Engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. He is currently employed as a data scientist at Capella Space, and his research interests include parametric SAR, machine learning, and information theory. He is a regular speaker at IoT and machine learning conferences and serves as a reviewer for international journals, among which include the IEEE Journal of Selected Topics in Applied Earth Observations and Remote Sensing and the IEEE Geoscience and Remote Sensing Letters. I would now like to request Sir to kindly take over the session.
Hey, I hope everyone can hear me. And so my name is Shaunak Dey, and I would like to thank the organizers for that very nice introduction. Usually when I speak, I like to hear people's introductions of me. They always tell me to say better things than I know about myself. Okay, so before we get started, I wanted to point you to my browser for a second and show you a little picture of where I am and the wonderful view which is usually outside. So before we start, I want to point you to this whiteboard that I have set up here. If people so I can't see the YouTube chat, so I would request, if you can, just join this Discord server. It will help us chat. You don't have to do it right now, but it would be good if you join it so I can see what everybody's asking and we can coordinate there. If you want to join this whiteboard, this is the URL. Feel free to go to your browsers, type. You can write things here like hi or ask me questions, and that way we can have it a little bit more interactive, even though in these times we are forced to, of course, do this over Zoom. So with that out of the way, I wanted to talk a little bit about what you can expect from this presentation. So today I'll go over a few main things. I will go over something that is not often talked about. So we all, of course, know that AI is taking over the world. Most jobs are in AI. Most companies are very happy with most companies are trying to hire very actively in AI, etc. Right? So the biggest thing that I wanted to speak about in today's presentation is the business of AI. Now we all know that you can go on any website and find a lot of information about models, Coursera courses teaching machine learning. But then there is one small step to go from the theory of AI to how to make money from it. And that's one of the big things we will discuss. We will also go into what jobs are available, etc. Right? But before I get started, it would be very nice to see if anybody has been able to join us on either the Discord or on the whiteboard. If you're there, please just say hi. And that way I will have some feedback, because right now it feels like I'm speaking to myself. Okay, I'll wait for about 1 more minute, and hopefully people can join this whiteboard or this chat server so we can speak and I can see your questions, etc., etc. Okay. Or I'll do my best to also monitor the YouTube chat. So, hi, please join the Discord or whiteboard. If you do join it, just say hi in the general channel or just write something on the whiteboard. So the whiteboard link is on the screen. It is that URL. I hope you can see it, bit.ly.3ch. I can try to zoom in a little bit if you can't see it, or let me try to put it in the YouTube chat. Oh. Okay. Can everybody see the whiteboard link? Maybe I will ask Professor Yashodas to help me out here.
Visible, Shauna?
Is the link visible?
Not really. You can post that link, I think, on live chat.
Yeah, I've done that.
Okay, fine.
I'll try to zoom in so the link can be visible. Yeah, I don't think Google likes me zooming in. Let me just text editor online. I'll just post it from here. Copy. Add. Okay, I have some chat here saying the video quality isn't that good. That might be a streaming problem through the Cisco WebEx. We do apologize for that, and let's see if we can try to get the quality up. Meanwhile, let me see if I can zoom in so you guys can see. Hopefully the font size here is big enough for everyone to see. Okay, perfect. So we have some people. Please join either place, and so I can see your feedback. I can have some conversations with you, and you can also ping me on the YouTube chat. Okay, now to get started, the first thing I would like to do before, there's a lot of time where we talk a lot and we show very little. So let's actually start off this presentation with a small demonstration. Please feel free to go to this site called aicart.cf and play around with it. But I will request, don't make more than one request on that website. And I will explain why as we go. I hope everybody can see this URL that is on the screens right now. It's aicart.cf. And open your browser and let's go. And meanwhile, I will also go to that website. So here's what you should see. This is a small demo website I have made to to showcase a little bit of whatever we are about to talk, just to get us excited. What you can do is you can right click and save this picture if you like, and then upload the same thing, or you can upload any other picture that you may have on your computer. So for the purpose of this demo, I will go upload just a picture of a cafe. And I will say search, right? And I will, of course, invite everybody to also do this. Go to that website, just try to limit it to just one request because this is running on my personal server. And as you see, once you run through that demo, it goes and recognizes whatever is on your image. So in my case, it has found clothing, kitchen, dining table, building, chair, person, etc. You can click on these buttons and you will see a card. You can click on the card to get a description of this item. You can click on it to be taken to Flipkart to buy the item, right? So hopefully some of you have been able to try this demo out. Also, I have some feedback which says there is some noise from my keyboard. I can try to minimize that noise. Okay. Please feel free to chat or anything that you like on one of the links that I have shared, okay, on the screen. But I'm hoping more of you have been able to at least try out this application. I'm going to try out one more thing that I have on my system. I'm going to put up my picture in the platform, say search, and see what it does, right? So it's going to run through my picture. Of course, please allow it to take a few seconds. Again, I mentioned it's running on my personal server, and we'll go through the reasons why as we go through this lecture, and it will take 5-6 seconds for this to happen. So again, as you see, it will run, it's still uploading the picture that I just tried. It's pretty big. Of course, it also depends on your network connection. Give it a few seconds for it to actually do the recognition. So you can see it's spinning around in the browser, and there you go. It has identified my hair correctly. It has identified the fact that I have clothing on. You'll also notice some more correct identifications, like I have a shirt, and of course it's making you go through this description and portal things. So hopefully people have been able to go there and play on this application. If you have, please drop a message in any one of the chats or on the whiteboard, and then I can proceed. So I know that you have seen the demo, you understand what we are building towards. Okay, so now that hopefully more of you have had a chance to go try this demo, hopefully you're curious and you're excited to see how this was built. And one thing that we can promise is by the end of this presentation, you'll have a much better idea how to build something like this for yourself. Okay, I'm going to proceed to move to my PowerPoint. So again, I'll give a few minutes for people on chat to confirm that they've been able to play with the demo, or they have been able to join the whiteboard or the Discord and communicate. Okay. So I'll leave the links there in both all chats, and I'll start off with this presentation. Please feel free to click and play with the demo as I speak, right? Okay. So to get started, so we often think that, the media makes you believe that there is some recipe for deep learning, right? You get a lot of hard data. So let's say you have a lot of images, or you have a lot of, let's say, text data. Maybe you collected a lot of information about some demographics. Okay, you have a lot of data, right? Then the next thing you want to do is get a bunch of GPUs and have a bunch of people label it. This is actually a picture of a labeling farm in China where people are tasked with labeling data for AI. And then what do we think will happen? We expect it to rain money, right? That is what we think should happen. We build an AI application, it works, it's very successful, and it makes us a lot of money. Unfortunately, it is not as direct and as simple as that. Of course, there are many steps and many pitfalls. So the first place to go and examine this is to talk about this. It's called the Gartner hype cycle. And it is, you might have seen this in other contexts. People talk about this for Bitcoin, people talk about this for IoT, people talk about this for pretty much everything, right? So essentially what this is, when some new technology comes up, and let's just say, I'm going to pick somebody from the Discord chat, let's say Namita. Namita invites us to a conference and says, hey, I have discovered a new method. With this new method, I can send pigs into space for only 500 rupees. Okay. So that is called the technology trigger stage. That is when your first discovering an idea usually happens at universities, right? And then, of course, Neha, again, and somebody from the Discord chat, I'm going to pick names randomly now. Okay. So Neha says, you know what, Namita, this is a great idea. Let's go find some venture capital, right? And we all know venture capital money news is every single day we hear some company raises X amount of money for doing Y, which is very much X for Uber, right? So like all of the venture capital, millions of dollars are raised. You hire some very smart people. And then you build a proof of concept. So much like the little demo you saw earlier, you build something that just works. And you start to test it. And some people who are early adopters, people who are very into technology, people who usually buy the new iPhone when it comes out, they go buy it, right? And then you have a peak of inflated expectations. This is all the headlines, all the media catches on the technology. Flying pigs in space will change the world. Flying pigs in space will make suppliers go crazy, whatever, right? And then you have this trough of disillusionment where you realize that every penny you invested into Bitcoin is actually pretty terrible. And you have lost all your money, right? So this is usually how technology goes. So after you go through that stage, you actually do the hard work of building a robust product, seeing what is actually marketable, what is not, what is a silly idea, what's a good idea. And then you move on to a stage where there is high adoption, high growth, and the technology stabilizes. And then it's no longer a hype. There is a joke in the robotics community. It's basically, what do you call a useful robot? The answer is a dishwasher, right? So when you see robots with pictures of androids and artificial intelligence, that's all this part of the spectrum, the technology trigger part. That is the part where you're just exploring what's happening, you're figuring out whether this hype is actually worth it or not. And then afterwards, after many years of research and development, and when normal companies just start developing the product, you go to a stage where you can buy it at Big Bazaar and bring it home. And then it's no longer called a robot, it's called an appliance, right? And the whole hype cycle starts again. So this is a very interesting thing to look at and to remember. So whenever you hear of a new technology, you should always ask yourself where it is on this hype cycle, as they call it. So the real thing, so this is what you think should happen with deep learning and AI. The real thing is it's a pretty boring career, and it's a very, and I don't mean to say this to discourage people from using deep learning or investing in a career in it, but generally you spend a lot of time just figuring out problems, very mundane problems, like how do you label a lot of data? How do you store a lot of data? How do you keep compliance with privacy? So as you know, there are many laws around the world, including GDPR, that say a user should be allowed to delete their data if they want to. So let's say you've built this massive AI algorithm, it's very successful. It's a little like AIcard.cf, which I will switch to again. And many people are using the product, many people are happy, but somebody says, please delete all the images I sent you because they were private to me, right? You have to comply with that. But do you mean to retrain your whole application? Do you just delete their images and keep the machine learning model in place? These are questions it's very hard to answer, and it's a big legal wrangle. And a lot of your job is dealing with that. Then, of course, there is data workflow. You want to make sure that if you're spending more money, getting more data, you want to be able to version it, you want to be able to label it, keep it. If you need to improve your algorithm, you want to know when was the last time you trained the algorithm and those things, right? And there is also continuous improvement. So points 5, 6, and 7 go into the continuous improvement side of things, where people want to, of course, people want to have a better algorithm, right? So now if you notice in our little app here that we have, some of the suggestions here are pretty silly, right? Like, let me just run this again and we can see. So I am uploading basically the picture that is here in this header, right? And I am saying search and let it upload really quickly and let it generate some results. So in that picture, it has discovered that the picture has clothing, which is true. There are people, like if we actually take a look at that picture, which I will open very shortly so we can all look at that picture instead of just me hypothetically talking about it. Give me a second. So this is the picture, right? So definitely there is people with clothing in it. There is definitely a table. There is definitely some, I don't know, foliage, a bar, some ventilation pipes, windows, etc. Right? So let's go back to the results. So yeah, clothing, it's true. And the suggestions that it has generated is absolutely correct. It found a t-shirt. T-shirt is a type of clothing. I don't know why they're selling this for 2,000 rupees, but apparently they are, right? The next part, you see it found kitchen and dining room table, and very accurately it has gone and found some product related to kitchen and dining room table, which is a Milton flask. It is definitely related to the kitchen, but it's not what you expect as a human being when you search for kitchen and dining room table, right? It definitely identified that there is a building in the picture, but what happens is you found Lego building blocks, which is not what you expect, because you can't buy a building on Flipkart, so you can buy building blocks, right? You understand the loose concept here. It has definitely found a table and has recommended a good table. Now, as you can imagine, if I was to ever build a version 2 of this product, I would have to start talking about how to improve those results, right? How to ignore stupid things like you can't buy a building on Flipkart, so let's not search for a building, etc., etc. Right? I hope everybody so far has been able to at least play with the app a little bit. If you have, please let me know on either the Discord chat in the general channel or on the whiteboard. So as you saw, even for our little app, like going from version 1 to building something that will actually be useful is a bit of a long journey, right? We have to actually take plenty of things into consideration. We have to start filtering things out manually. Here is an example, like what if you upload a picture that is not appropriate, right? Like if you upload a picture that is considered racist or sexist or something like that, and we come up with a result that's that bad, And I'll tell you why I'm talking about this and why that last, public relations and communications, is important. Do you remember this app? Does anybody remember when Microsoft made a Twitter bot and it went really, really, really badly? So essentially, you have to be very careful, and continuous improvement is a big part of any AI application that you build. I'm going to pause a second for the chat to catch up. I see some people are asking questions, and also please feel free at any point to ask me questions. I would like it to be as interactive as possible. Okay, I see names. Hello to everyone. I'll also start picking names from the YouTube chat as I speak. But hopefully everybody has so far been able to join the Discord, join the whiteboard, use the app, and we can proceed, right? So my point here is there are a lot of boring things that you need to think of when you're thinking of industrial AI, right? It's not just some simple one-trick solution. It's not, let's go to Google Colab, let's make a notebook, let's download a model. There are a few steps after that, and we'll talk more about it in detail. The next part of data science is, in general, what do you actually do as a data scientist, right? Like most of my time, and this survey that I have up on the screen now for the people on stream, this survey is from Forbes, right? So Forbes estimates, they ran a survey for a whole lot of people in who are data scientists or data analysts, and they said, okay, what do you actually spend your time doing? And turns out 60% of your time is just cleaning and organizing the data. That's all, right? So that's not what you imagine when you think this is what I want to do data science. It's not all very glamorous. And this is my personal sort of graph, again from Forbes, but I've tweaked the percentages a little from the survey. My least enjoyable part of my day-to-day is cleaning and organizing data, which happens to be what you do the most. So it's a funny conundrum that you end up in. Anyway, so generally you can break down all the steps that you see in machine learning to these big boxes, right? And this is what you will see in your university research and generally when you're trying to build something. By the way, before we proceed, let me actually ask, let me start with a poll. How many, wait, so poll, and I should probably let the stream see what I'm asking in the poll. So basically what I'm asking is, have you built any machine learning models? So simple yes, no poll. Have you, has the audience built any machine learning models? You can answer wherever it's comfortable. If you're answering on YouTube, I'll try to keep a track of it. If you're answering on Discord, tell me yes or no. Just so that I know whether you have actually built any machine learning models and if you have faced any of these. Actually, Professor Yehudas, if you can also coordinate, like what is the general experience level of the people? Okay, so I've got one person saying no. Anybody else who? Okay, so let's. Okay, so I have at least 4 no's. That gives me enough of an insight to say, yeah, it's not common in this audience. So let me actually go through some basic parts of if you were to develop a machine learning model, what you would do, right? First, you would start collecting some data. And let me actually switch to the browser and look at some places where you can get data. Literally, if you go into Google and put in data sources, actually, Kaggle, for example. You go to Kaggle, you go to the datasets link, and let's say you find something. You find property listings for South American countries, right? So this would usually be in the form of a table. I don't know if there's a sample here, but they would have explained to you what is there in this data set. You would say, yeah, there is what type of property it is, which country it is located in, what's the ID, what's the start date, etc. Right? So, and I can imagine that because of the video stream quality, you can probably not see this, but I've just gone to some Kaggle challenge and I've zoomed in, so hopefully that will reflect. Also going to post this everywhere, so everybody can go themselves and check this web page out. Bear in mind, there's a small delay between what's happening on YouTube and what's happening on my computer, so just please allow for a few seconds. Okay, I've got multiple feedback saying the screen is not very clear. Let me see. If I cannot do much more to fix this, maybe Cisco WebEx can do something. Okay, I'm going to try to keep my screen zoomed in maximum so that it's a little clearer. I'm assuming the lack of clarity is because of the streaming quality. You have to allow for the slow internet. Of course, this video I am recording, so I will make this available later so you can see everything on the screen if you miss something. But meanwhile, I'll just bear in mind to keep the font size large. Thank you for the feedback, whatever your real name is, Romil, and let's continue for a little bit, right? So you go to this data. There are some other sources of data that you can search. Usually UC Irvine dataset is one of the ones that I recommend if you are just starting out. Okay, and I have the data, like the web page up on my screen. If you just search UCI machine learning repository, you will come to this, and I'm going to open one of these ones, right? So let's open this anonymous Microsoft Web Data. So you will see generally the data set will consist of some categories that they have mentioned here. They will have usually given some information how they collected it and what you can do, right? So you have 294 categories or columns or features, whatever you call it here. You have 37,000 examples. So the idea is you would take this data and you would feed it into some kind of common machine learning model, let's say SVM or some neural networks or some deep learning, right? So that goes to the part that is here, which is data wrangling. So you want to take the data, you want to label it, you want to clean it. Then after that, you will go to some training. You will say, okay, let's develop a good algorithm. For example, one of the good algorithms to develop is support vector machines, right? So you will develop it, then you will validate it. You will take some random data that comes from the public, like in this case, from you guys using that app that I showed you. I am monitoring to make sure that it's working correctly, right? But unfortunately, this is not the end of the headache. This is, I would say, what the starting steps are. The next steps get very complicated very quickly. And also, I know you will probably not be able to read the font on this. I don't really expect the font to be visible. This is more or less an illustration of just how many actual steps there are. So I sat down carefully and I wrote down everything that I had to do in, let's say, the last month in any machine learning app that I am developing for work. So I have some questions coming in. I'll get to them after I finish this slide. We'll take a question break. But you see, the first step to actually doing this for industry or for work is to scope the project, right? Like, if you're spending money on it, you cannot say, I will build the best AI recommendation Flipkart app engine ever on the planet, right? It's not going to happen because you have to go through planning. You have to deal with management and money and economics. You have to deal with operations. You have to deal with what the budgets are. How much can you spend? So just to give you a small preview of this, just for that demo app that we saw, the AI cart app, I had to decide how much of my own money I would spend, right? For this demo, I made it this weekend for you guys. So I decided the maximum I'm willing to spend is something in the range of 500, 600 rupees, which means I cannot use a GPU, right? I have to use a CPU, and I'll explain all of that why later. So the first step is to always budget. Is this feature going to be useful? Is this feature going to make me money? So one business model for that, for this app, for example, and I'll demonstrate with the browser. When you actually search for something here in this app and you go to Flipkart using the link that is available, what's happening is, if you notice in this URL segment here, there is an affiliate link, right? Because I have brought traffic to Flipkart's website. If you buy something, and if you are already going to buy a chair, please buy it from me. I'll make 5 rupees. But yeah, the idea is, if you buy something, Flipkart will have to pay me for having sent that traffic to them, right? That's it's called the Flipkart affiliate program. If you're interested, every e-commerce provider allows this, and that's why you see so many ads that you have in the site that is saying buy from Flipkart, buy now, even though you have just bought like a chair. So every time you click and go to Flipkart from an ad, the person who placed that ad, or in this case a link, makes some money. Now the question is, how much money? So essentially, let's take an example of this chair. If you did end up buying this chair for 3,899, which please don't, this is highly overpriced. And I'll talk a little bit about the overpriced nature of it. Let's say Flipkart makes 100 rupee profit on this product, then I would have got 1% or 1 rupee of the profit margin, right? And every affiliate marketing place has different agreements. Now, as you can tell, all of these products that you're seeing here are highly priced, right? Like, who buys a dumb wallet for 700 or a table for 6,000? The reason is, one part of that algorithm that I have developed for this app tries to place the most expensive products returned from my search in front of you, right? That's why you have a 2,500 rupee t-shirt, etc. Why? So I can make some money. So that brings us to the budget part of it. If you actually think of it, by understanding and allocating that, hey, if I am making more than 250 rupees a week, I can pay for the hosting of this website. Great, right? So this is actually the fundamental part of deciding machine learning projects. And the next part is managing the data. Where will all this be stored? It costs money to store data. All of you have this experience. You buy a hard drive, it costs 4,000 or 5,000 rupees. It gets full because you downloaded too many movies. Now you have to invest more money to store more data. And that is also true. So if all of you who are on this stream and on this chat actually start uploading, I will run out of disk space on that server very soon, and I'll have to add to it, and it'll add to my costs, right? And then there is actual cost of development. So machine learning engineers are today one of the most highly paid engineers, so you have to account for that. Cost of production, where will it be hosted? How much performance will I allow it? Who will do the quality check? Do I have to do a quality check? If I come in the news because my AI is racist, who takes care of the damage? So all of these are the I would say the boring parts of AI. It's not exciting, but it is important, right? So the previous slide, I sort of listed a lot of things, but I do want to talk about the AI life cycle, which is a simplified view of the previous one. So we'll talk a little of planning the app from the lens of the app that we have just seen. Meanwhile, I have a question from Smita. And the question from Smita is, what are the best tools for the construction of an image data set, right? So what are the best tools? And I'm going to just put up all the questions on the whiteboard itself. Please feel free to add the questions to the whiteboard. Also, let me check the Discord. If you have any questions, please, now is a good time to ask it. So what are the best tools for image labeling? I will actually come to that ahead in this presentation. So, but without skipping too far ahead, there are a lot of open source tools, and then there are a lot of commercial tools available. So if you go to Labelbox, so this is one of the tools that I personally use and like, and I use it both at work and for personal projects. It's called Labelbox. So hopefully that gets you started, but I will talk a little bit more in detail about this. So just to get some sort of feedback from the audience, what do you rate your experience in, let's say, Python programming as out of 10? Would you say you're competent, you're not? Based on that, I will choose the next set of slides because I don't want to give you information that you can't immediately use. Anybody in the chat, on the whiteboard, Discord, someplace? Okay, I see Amit typing, so I'm going to wait for Amit to finish typing. Any more questions? Okay, so we have one person who is 9 out of 10. We also have another question from Jyoti. What are the softwares to draw deep learning models? So, okay, all of you are fairly confident with Python. Now, what is your general confidence in AI or making machine learning models? Okay, so all of you are fairly competent, so we can proceed with this presentation itself. So, okay, let me proceed. I'm also really sorry there's a delay in the stream and your questions. Alistair says 6 out of 10, so that's very confident. So, okay, the reason I asked, if you have some Python experience, you can build a machine learning app in 30 minutes. And if it is of interest to the audience, we will do some live coding at the end of this stream. So all of you can see how easy it is, and I'll show you some resources, right? So coming to what that means for the AI lifecycle and what you think of this. So the box I've highlighted in gray, training and debugging. If you can Google things from Python, you have enough experience to build this dark gray box. Trust me. Like, just go open scikit-learn, get one of the data sources from UCI, the repo I showed you, or from Kaggle, build a simple model, and you will have a really good time. You will have built a very simple machine learning model. And the next steps. So that is usually the part that most people who are just beginning machine learning are exposed to. Unfortunately, the next steps is where the complexity starts, right? And this is indeed how most AI projects go. So AI projects start with training and developing algorithms. They move on to data collection and labeling. So, I've decided I want to build a model for text analysis. Okay, so we have some more votes for live coding, but also, so Amit asked, can you suggest a best machine learning model for text analytics? Let's take an example of that and proceed with the slide. So let's say we were building a text app, right? We were building something to generate, let's say, whether a person is happy or sad based on their comments, or maybe to see if they're bullying someone, right? So you would collect a lot of text data, obviously. A good place would be just to scrape Reddit, and you can do it in Python very easily. You go to scrapey.py, import that library, you scrape the data, you have the data, right? So from there, you move to this step, which is called the data collection and labeling. So we have, so essentially what we will do is we will go collect a lot of data, we will label it, we will then send it back down in this arrow to back to training and debugging. Okay, come up with a model, you test it. So you deploy it, you get a whole bunch of strangers on a YouTube live stream to test your app, and then they say, okay, yeah, the app is working, or it's not, or it's wrong in this way and that way. You take that feedback, go back here, train and debug it, go back, collect more data if necessary, go back, revise your plan. Is this worth it? Is this working? Etc. Then you come back down and you do this over and over. And honestly, it is a process of continuous integration and continuous improvement. So I've some feedback that says you would like to see us develop a small machine learning model. Let's definitely speed through this presentation a little so we can do some live coding. Okay, I have another question that says, what are the best tools for drawing CNN models in research papers? There is two I personally use, and let me switch to Edge so I can show you. I personally use this tool called draw.io, T-R-A-W, draw.io. You can see it's a very, very interesting place that you can create all sorts of diagrams. So I'm just going to pick up one, right? So you can draw architecture diagrams, you can draw neural network diagrams, etc. The other thing I would suggest is to actually draw it programmatically, because some of modern neural networks are of course very, very complex, and most, depending on what framework you're using, if you're using Keras, there is a tensor board actually draws the diagram very nicely for you. If you're using Caffe, there is a tool to draw it. So between these two, you should be able to easily come up with whatever you need to draw. Hopefully that answered that question for a lot of people. I'll put it here. The tool is called draw.io. It's pretty simple to remember. Okay, going back to the PowerPoint. So far we saw that there is a whole step which is very cyclic when you build any kind of machine learning apps, right? Like you go up, down, etc. There is also a component that is usually as technical people we don't think of, which is what is the infrastructure like? Who is going to maintain the tooling? Who is going to maintain the code? Who is going to hire the team? How much budget do we have for hiring the team? And all those parts of any company is also very, very important. I also have a question from Swati, who asks which framework is best for machine learning or for deep learning. I will come to that in the end of the slide. There is no best framework. I personally use TensorFlow because that's what I'm comfortable with. There's a lot of people who use PyTorch. Essentially, one of the things I want to convey a lot, and if you remember only one thing from this stream, there are no good tools, there are no bad tools, there are just tools, right? Decide what you want to do and just try to do it. This is a slightly better diagram that I have for this AI lifecycle, and it goes a little bit into that philosophy, which is start simple, just whatever, it doesn't matter. If you don't know TensorFlow, if you don't know Keras, doesn't matter. If you know Python, you can already use NumPy, you already have access to support vector machines, you have access to a lot of things, right? Start there, start simple, implement it, test it. You can then keep improving this infinitely. Honestly, like your time will be over, your careers will pass, and you will not come to a satisfactory answer. So just start simple. So that's actually a very good question. Thank you for asking that, Swati. The answer is there is no best framework. There is the framework you know. And it's like that old proverb, the best camera is the one that is in your pocket. The best framework, the best language is what you know already. If you don't know any programming language, I think Python is a good place to start. If you know anything, you know JavaScript, you know anything, it's fine, just use it, right? So this is sort of my, you can say machine learning level or level up system that I came up with. This is basically, you should start with theory. There is no substitute for theory. The simplest machine learning model is actually something that you're taught in 6th standard. Can you believe that? Can anybody on any chat think of a machine learning model that you learned in 6th standard? Anybody? Machine learning model in 6th standard? I don't have any answers. Okay, so, okay, I have one answer. Somebody says, no, they don't teach you machine learning in 6th standard. Okay, let me go to the browser again and show you. All of us have learned y equals to linear or equation of a line. Please keep the questions coming, they're very helpful. All of you have learned this model for sure. 5th standard, 6th standard, right? Like in high school, we have definitely learned how to draw straight lines. This is a machine learning model, and let me explain why. Let me go to the whiteboard. Again, everybody please feel free to join this whiteboard. Okay, right? You have y equals to mx plus c. All of us have been taught this when we were really young. And we think it's just the equation of a straight line that you need to get marks, right? Now, if I just do this, blood pressure, risk of COVID. or diabetes or whatever, right? Suddenly you have a very good approximate machine learning model. The higher your blood pressure above normal, the higher your risk of fatality. That's why everybody please go exercise. So yes, there are simple machine learning models. Don't be intimidated. Learn the theory, learn it well. Focus on simple parts of the theory. Focus on what you actually understand. If you don't understand something, don't worry too much, right? Train your machine learning model from what you know, and then try to build something practical, like try to build AI cart or try to build something that you care about, because that is really the only way to learn. So yes, you learned a machine learning model in 6th standard. I'm going to go with some more questions while the speed catches up. So one question is dealing with class toxicity. So how do you deal with toxicity in a class or in like Reddit? That's actually a very interesting question. If everyone remembers IBM Watson, they actually have some very good sentiment analysis models for text that you can use to analyze whether a comment is on the verge of bullying or not. And unfortunately, the idea is that these models are very much rudimentary, and there is a very important and interesting question to discuss, right? I'm going to actually, so let's spend some time answering that question of toxicity. And I will hope that you on the chat respond to me asking a question here. So let's say I have a statement and I type, I'm going to do it in edit pad. Let's say I say, this class is terrible. I hope you don't feel that way about me, but let's say I come up with this statement, right? This class is terrible. How many of you think that this statement is toxic? I'm going to wait for the feed to catch up. How many of you think this statement is toxic? Okay, so quick poll. I'm going to poll on the Discord. Poll. Is the statement this class is terrible toxic? So we have some votes. Most people think that statement is not toxic, right? Okay, now I'm going to make another statement. The teacher is an idiot. Is this toxic? Is the poll again going to poll? By the way, for those of you not on the Discord chat, let me see if I can try to share it with the main stream. Just give me a second. Window capture. So you can see the poll. I will zoom in. So hopefully everybody can see more. Zoom, plus. Right. So I'm going to actually just take the result from here. So 7 people said, going back to Edge. So 7 people said the first statement that I have here is not toxic, right? 7 no's. And we don't have any answers for the other poll. And they're split. This one is 50-50. So there are 4 people that have answered so far. And it's 50-50. So you see the first big problem of coming up with something. Okay. So there are some more questions. I'm going to go into them, but the first one is like, this is interesting, right? Like, even as a group of human beings, we can't decide if the statement is toxic. So how do we expect a machine learning model to tell that to us? And that is I think that is the interesting thing to always remember. How we define what is toxic, how we define what is not toxic is hard, and that is where like solving for dealing with like toxicity models come in. But it's also, by the way, a very interesting question and a very interesting application area and very relevant. So I would say more and more people should go and try to do something in it, because that's how we will solve the issue. Okay, so now we have some other questions. I'm going to take like a short second to answer the other questions. So Raj asks, what impact does it make to you if you're a recruiter and you learn that instead of using the libraries already available, you're using self-made libraries? So I'm going to put the question up so everybody can read it. And I'm going to bring up this. So this is the question from Raj, and let me quickly discuss this. If I am interviewing a candidate and they have not used a library but chose to re-implement everything without a good reason, I generally don't like that, and I'll tell you why. The big issue with like trying to do everything yourself, right? So let me take you to an analogy. How do you bake bread, right? How do you you don't go grow your own wheat, and you don't go ground your wheat in a machine you have made, and then you don't add water that you have purified in your chlorine purifying system, and then you don't build your oven, right? You use an oven, you use wheat. So using libraries, there's no shame, and in fact, it is really silly if you waste your time doing something that somebody else has already done really, really well. I'll give you a very simple example. Most of us, if you ask to, for example, calculate Fibonacci numbers, will start with something like for I in range, etc., etc. This is a really inefficient way of, because Python looping is very slow. You should be using collections, but it is much harder to do. So I would say if there is libraries available, feel free to use it. Like, there is no shame in using libraries. Just like you don't make your own oven, you shouldn't have to make your own tools and libraries, right? So by the way, this app would not be possible in one night, or I think I spent exactly one night on it, if I hadn't leveraged pre-existing libraries, and it would not work as well. And I'm going to show you how to do it more efficiently as we go on in the presentation. So yeah, the short answer is no, it doesn't matter. Anyway, going back to my slides. I'm going to overwhelm you a little bit with some diagrams and some logos on the screen. So bear with me for a second. What you see on your screen are roughly all the tools and products that, as a machine learning engineer or as a data scientist, you will end up using every single day. And basically, there is a lot of technology that goes into making sure that machine learning is deliverable. Like, developing a model is often, and I think I've said this before, developing a model is often the smallest part, right? So all of this, finding data, labeling it, finding databases, all of these things is what you usually deal with, or what you'll deal with on your computer. Everything else here is just as important. It is, okay, sorry, I'm not pointing with my mouse, hopefully this time. So, right, like, and by the way, these logos that you see on screen, and feel free, I'm going to circulate this presentation later anyway, so don't feel like you have to do this. These logos are all tools that will really, really help you, and I'll point to the logo and explain these tools. DBC is a good way to version your data. Prodigy is an open source tool to label data. Scale AI, Figure 8, of course, offer commercial services. SQL, I hope all of you are familiar with. You can store your data on Amazon S3. Right, these are tools that you will need to use even to develop your model, but beyond that, there are even more tools. There is frameworks like TensorFlow or Keras. There is ways to distribute training. I think distributed TensorFlow is now called Kubeflow. there are ways that you package your application. Have you ever experienced that thing where you build your project and your professor comes to you and suddenly the project doesn't work anymore? There are lots of software engineering that you do have to do to prevent that situation on your job, right? You have to make sure that it is reproducible because your servers will be running somewhere else. After that, you have to continuously monitor it, etc., etc. So there are a lot of parts of deep learning and all of these things that you need to learn. And the reason I put this up right up front is because I don't want you to be scared of learning new things. In fact, I will transition and segue to a small set of slides which tell you exactly how necessary it is to learn new things. So before we go on with this presentation, I hope this is clear to everyone, and I hope everything is okay. All of you are following along, all of you are able to participate, you're able to chat. Let me answer some more questions. So Amit actually asks, is it possible to find out if a text is sarcastic? Yes, it is, with conditions applied, because it would be localized to the language and the common patterns of speech and the culture, right? So it is possible, it's a good challenge, and if anybody is starting research, I would say definitely go for it, but it's not an easy answer. And you would have to account for a lot of things in context. And one of the things that is commonly used for doing these kind of things is LSTM, if anybody wants to just Google that later, right? Okay, there's a question that says, come up with a model that identifies if a tweet is objectifying a human. That is actually a very, very interesting research topic that is currently under exploration by the Google team at DeepBrain. And you should definitely follow their blog and follow their research. So if everybody is finding everything okay so far, let me actually take you through a small PowerPoint presentation. If it's up here, it's not. You give me a second, I will bring that up. Okay, hopefully everybody can see the screen, and I can also put it back onto reading view so everybody can see this. Maximize volume. Hopefully everybody can see this. This diagram is very small and hard to read, so I don't expect you to read every part of it. But what this diagram shows you is what happens how computer languages evolve, right? So the first computer language in history was ENIAC, and ENIAC branched into three ways, and slowly, as you zoom into this, and you can just search computer language tree, you'll get a high resolution picture of this image. For those who can't see on the stream, you can see how many languages we have developed over time, right? Why am I showing you this tree? I'm showing you this tree, and this is just another representation of that same information, just how computer languages have evolved. This is also sort of so this is a small diagram of all the things that you might have seen recruiters ask for on your resume, right? Everybody remembers when Angular was very, very interesting and important, and everybody wanted to be a part of Angular. Then React got released, and then React became the next big thing, and there's Meteor, and then I'm sure as we keep going in 2020 there'll be something new, there'll be Django, there'll be all sets of skills. As a professional software engineer, it is your job to learn things, right? Don't be scared of it. Nobody's going to take an exam. You have to learn it, you have to adapt, and it's very easy when you think of it that way. And if you just keep building things, it will be very easy to learn things. This is the same hype cycle that I show you, just a simplified version. So basically what I'm saying is there will always be tools and technologies to keep learning. So don't be afraid of it. The simplest thing you can do is build an MVP. Build a simple app using this tool of your choice, and continue building, continue trying to learn. It will be very, very helpful. I want to leave this little quote from a programmer I respect a lot called Zed Shaw on screen as I take a quick break to drink some water and catch up with questions on the chat and other things. There's questions about certificates. You will probably receive it automatically at the end of this presentation, as I'm not very sure the logistics of that. So let me go get a drink of water, and I hope you can read this quote. It is very, very impactful and very, very powerful to me personally. So I'll leave you with that while I get myself some water. Okay, resuming. So the TLDR of this quote is, the TLDR of this quote is you have to keep learning things, and it is not about the learning, it's about what you build with what you learn that is important, right? So build things, build apps to, there's wonderful ideas that is coming from the audience. Build something to find sarcastic text. By all means, try it out. Okay, let me go back to the presentation so that we can transition to the next part of this, which is sort of the 4 steps that you have to remember when you're developing for machine learning and for AI. And I'll go through it a little faster because, of course, a lot of participants on this webinar, they haven't had much experience building machine learning models. So that way I'll try to save some time and show you how the app that you all played around with works. And I will show you some of the trade-offs that I had to make. And, if time permits and if people are on the stream, we can try to do something live on Google Colab and see how that goes. Again, if you have any questions, throw it on the chat, any of the chats. I'm reading them, and let me know. Anyway, I'm going to go to, so there are 4 major parts of the machine learning roadmap. The first one, and probably the most boring one, is data labeling. I'll go through some tools and tricks and techniques that you can use to get labels, because that is often the first part of any good algorithm. Okay, then there are some data storage and other things. Meanwhile, I have a question from Ramil, whose real name I'm sure is not Ramil. How do you bring traffic to your site? I actually don't. So this is not an application that I develop, or it's not a professional application, right? This is, I'm showing you the chat window so everybody can see. This is the question. How do you bring traffic to your site? So I don't. This is an application I developed explicitly for this lecture, just for all of you guys. It's not something that is like financial or something. Having said that, this question is very, very interesting. There are lots and lots of strategies. Like, it is, product marketing is as important as building your product. So I would say focus on building something people want, get early feedback on what that is, eliminate things that you don't care about, and then, push it to a few people. If people like it, they will spread the word, right? Like, think of your favorite app. Why are we using Discord? I am using Discord here to talk to all of you because I like this. It's really smooth. It's a real-time chat. I can have polls, etc. Right? I hope that answers your question, Ramil. Let me get back to the next parts of this presentation. Okay, so some tools, tricks, and strategies for data labeling. So there is a vast commercial landscape for data labeling. It's a very good business, by the way, if you're thinking of making a startup. Data labeling is necessary for almost every machine learning project, and one of the world's largest companies, Scale.ai, or the largest startup last year, their whole business model is data labeling. So if you see on the slide, this is from a screenshot from Hive. Hive is something I use I also think you can't follow my mouse on the YouTube stream, so I'm going to try and describe. So on the bottom right of the slide, you see a typical commercial labeling tool. It's called Hive, and this is where your pictures show up, and this is how the markers annotate that, right? So you see a typical application that you would do for self-driving cars. Then there is also Supervisorly, which I use at work, which is a really good platform again. Of course, all of these, some of these platforms are completely free, like Labelbox is free. So you can sign up, and for like academic projects, you can do it. To people in colleges and universities, the two interesting ones are Zooniverse and Prodigy. Prodigy is something you can self-host, which means you can install on your own server and give it out to your juniors for data labeling, etc. Zooniverse is an academic labeling website. So actually the website is zooniverse.org. And if you have an academic project, you can seek crowdsourcing help. So the first 5 on this list are paid. The last 3 are free for academic use. So you can explore those tools. So some people had questions earlier about how to label data, etc. So that basically is one of the ways that you can label it. There was one more question earlier, is how can you scrape the dark web? So at the end, even if you're surfing, I don't like the term dark web because generally it is associated with nefarious activities. It is the web outside the accepted DNS model that we all use. You can scrape it just like you scrape any normal website. So if you're connected to a DNS server that can direct you to non-public websites, also called as the dark web, you go there, it's just a HTML page, you can scrape it like any other HTML page. Namita has a question, which is, to understand the working of any model, understanding the mathematics is important or not? If yes, how to get through as though they were more difficult than we expect? Any suggestions? I am going to bring this question up because this question is, I think, very, very interesting and important. So this is a great question. By the way, even if we never get through the rest of the presentation, it doesn't matter, because I would rather answer individual questions from any experiences that I may have. So I want to actually show you a really difficult model, or a model I consider to be extremely difficult, right? So I'm just going to bring it up. Map of support vector machine. This is not a latest model, or this is not like something that is in the news or the media or like is common, but it's an old model, right? Like this came out in the 90s, it was very popular, and it's very, very effective for most intents and purposes. It's built into NumPy, etc. So, when you scroll through this, initially this is easy. These are the features, okay. I remember this from high school, okay. Then there is a place where it will come to this, and it's getting difficult and I can't fully understand it, but okay. Then there is these other concepts and hyperplanes, and by the time I've scrolled through this post, it's becoming very, very difficult for me to understand. I am really not fully understanding this. I'm not understanding what this dual problem is, kernel trick is, or at least when I first started doing work in machine learning, or when I was doing my PhD, I didn't fully understand it. What I did was I tried toy problems, and that is why toy problems, or these small problems that you can get on like the UC Irvine problem set, is important, right? So don't jump into Kaggle first. Kaggle is a really difficult problem set. You want to go here, right? You want to pick something that is designed for, let's say, classification. You want to pick something that is rated as easy, right? So I see that this dataset, alcohol QCM sensor dataset, has only 125 data points and just 8, how can I call it, 8 features, right? I want to go to this model first. I want to download it. So of course you can download it as a zip. You open it out. I'm going to try and see if I can show you this in on the browser quickly. So when you download it, usually it shows up. Okay, it's not going to let me show you this, but I can do something else instead. let's see. Let's see if I can open this and show you so we can discuss it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, never mind. So basically, if you go and download this dataset yourself, feel free to do it. You will see that it's just a lot of comma separated values. So I'll just paste it into EditPad so all of you can see what I'm talking about. The dataset looks something like this, right? So this is obviously comma separated. If you format it in Excel, it will look a lot better. But yeah, there is some numbers and there are some features. So what I would do is I would take them, but you see the advantage is there's very few of them. There's just 26 of them. So I would take this, I would go to like a simple SVM. So like just go to scikit learn SVM. And this is where libraries that you already have come in very, very handy, right? You go there, you run your SVM classification, you change settings, change as many settings as you can. If you're reading any function, try it with a linear kernel, try it with a polynomial kernel, try it with a radial basis function kernel, plot things. As you start experimenting more and more, you will realize how it works. You'll get a good intuition, right? Once you have a good intuition, then you can go back to that math and see, you can pause. This is a skill that not many people usually learn, but it's fundamental. Any Python program, you can step through it. And actually, let me show you an example just so that you know how to next time learn more about what's exactly happening. Okay. Let's go to VS Code and hopefully you can see it on the screen. And I'm going to start a very simple new file here. I'm going to call it let me call it new file, call it simple.py. And please feel free to type in chat if you don't know how the Python debugger works. But here's an example: import requests, right? And so we are live coding, and things can go wrong, and you will see that even people who do this a lot don't really know all the answers all the time. So don't feel embarrassed that you have to look up things, right? I will also be looking up things. So anyway, so let's go if name equals to main. Sorry about my typing noise, my keyboard is loud, right? I'm going to say request.get, and let's go for my own website. I'm just going to do a simple thing here. We will print this out. We will see if this works. So usually, how do you run a Python program? I'm going to open a new terminal so that you don't have to bother with this. Python. You usually go here, you drag this here, and you run it, right? And suddenly you're thrown with invalid syntax and a lot of errors. So what do? You go back, you fix that syntax error, you run it again. You don't give up. That is step one. Run it again. It says no module name request. So you install request. Pip. Okay. Now we have requests. Sorry about that. We go there and it says response 200, right? You don't know what it did. You don't know what that object comprises of. So what do? You go to the library and you say, okay, what the hell is this and how do I make sense of it? Clearly, this is not the website I asked for, right? So then you say dot text, save that, and you try it. So this is usually the cycle, and you see it has gone and fetched the HTTP, right? So you can find my email address from my site. Feel free to send me an email if you want to stay in touch. But anyway, so this is generally how Python programs are developed, and we all know this, right? But there is one important skill I guess everybody should be aware of and know is to use the debugger. So you do -m, you do pdb. PDB is built in, it's the default Python debugger, and you say go. So now instead of just executing your program, you see it has dropped me into this prompt here, and I can choose to go line by line. So I can say next, and it will go to the next line. And I can say next, and it will go to the next line. Now let's say I'm curious, I want to see how the request library works. I can say step, and actually, if you see, go into the code of that library. Do you see this? This is not code we just wrote. This is code inside the request library. And you can see exactly what it calls. And you say next, and it goes, and you can keep stepping through your program. And we have come to the print statement now. You can then see rec and see what that object is. You can type dir rec, and you can try to see, well, what is allowed? Oh, I can see I am allowed to call this function called JSON. So let me try that. Let me try rec.json. And it says it's on method, so I call it. And it says it was expecting something else, right? Let me try to see what this link says. Oh, it's empty. So what I'm trying to show here is that you can explore a lot. So even if you were developing a very complex application, you want to be exploring, and this is how you can discover. So the question that I started to try and answer was, how do you learn something if the mathematical model is very complicated? You do this, you build something, you step through it line by line, and then you try to match it with the equations, right? And sometimes you won't have to know all the details. Sometimes you have to know the basics, you'll get an intuition. Sometimes you have to really step into the details, and that's how you can do it. You can go line by line. Every Python program, you can access the code for every library. It's all pretty much open source. By nature of Python, it's an interpreted language. So that is my suggestion. If you are trying to follow a complex model, definitely do it. And I wanted to take some time to go explain that because I feel like that's a very interesting approach, right? So, and this is not something that's common. So I'm going to go through and show you some of these tools. Let me see, I have a few questions. Okay, so I'm looking at any questions. I hope, Namita, your question is answered there. I'm looking through questions on YouTube, and we don't have any more questions. Okay, so essentially, this is Prodigy. This is the self-hosted platform that I was sort of telling you. You can go to this website, prodigy.demo, and this is how you can do labeling, right? So there is some tools available. One of the things that you will discover once you start actually labeling data for the industry is that there is a very high focus on how much accuracy you need in your labels. If you machine learning is a garbage in, garbage out system. What I mean by that is, if you have very bad labels, you will get very bad results. So you have to go do quality check, do quality control all the time. The next thing I wanted to talk about is data storage. So here is a really interesting slide just showing how much data is generated on major platforms per minute, right? So think about, I don't know if you will be able to see this on YouTube, but just petabytes, right? Like you will generate petabytes of data every single month. So how do you store it? There's cost to storing. There are certain, and of course, how to compute it is also a bigger deal. Like you see, as time has gone on, the complexity of neural networks has increased, and the amount of compute you need has also exponentially increased. Like this is not a linear scale. This is a log scale, if you notice. So the first network that became very popular, AlexNet, it needed 0.01 petaflops. And now AlphaGo Zero needs 10,000 petaflops. That's literally supercomputers, right? So, and also the landscape has exploded. over time, the landscape of this has exploded. You can see that in 2016, these were all the tools that were available. And remember, whenever there is tools in industry, there is always a reason. This is what this landscape looks like today. So again, without being intimidated, I want to suggest to you something very actionable. Don't look at all the tools. Know that you might need them at some point, but focus on the basics. Can you save your data to your file system? By file system, of course, your local computer, right? Okay, so basically you save all the files to your local computer, you process, you build some application. Then after that, you can figure out where object store is. So it's like a 3-step program. Object store, common ones are Amazon S3. There are others that are offered. So basically you go there, and then you need to know how to wrangle databases. So as long as you focus on these core technologies, you should be in a good place to develop even complex applications. And I also very highly recommend this book, Data Driven Applications. Again, the slides will be available to you, so don't try to jot everything down. And the final thing is, know a little bit about the data lake. It's one of the most common ways that industry accesses and stores large amounts of data. So I know there are courses that you can do in your colleges that teach you how to use data lakes, or just what they are. You need to learn quite a little bit. So my slides here are for AWS because that's what I use a lot at work. But of course, there are other data lakes. And the final sort of thing that I want to touch in this presentation, we are coming to the end of this presentation, so I want to try and wrap up a little bit. But what I want to trap is data versioning. So usually when you start out any project, we never think of this, right? You collect the data, you store it in some folder, you do some training, and then we forget. And then 6 months later, when your app stops working, you're wondering, how do I do this training? What do I do? Etc. etc. So the main thing to always remember in this thing is at least try to save some snapshot when you start doing this kind of operations and applications, right? Save it to Google Drive. It doesn't matter. Save it somewhere. But as your skills mature and as your application mature, try to use this tool. It's called DVC. It's an open source tool, and it will help you basically version control and check your data into Git. And of course, when you go into production, you want to use tools like these called Great Expectations, which will help you check how your model is performing and how your data is. It corrupted? Is the data not meeting the parameters that the model were trained at, right? So these are some of the most common sources of errors when you talk about industrial machine learning. You trained your model on like data from 16-year-old boys, and suddenly your app is now being used by 20-year-old men. And of course, your machine learning model will fail. So you want to monitor your data as it comes. The final part of this presentation I want to brief, and this is probably interesting and important for a lot of you, is jobs in AI. What are the job titles? What are the job roles? What should you learn? The first and foremost thing to remember is you have to, like currently, AI jobs are far outpacing the number of people that are trained in AI, right? You look at this graph, it's very clear that for every job posting, or rather for every 100 job posting, there's a small fraction of people available to do that. So yes, this is a good career opportunity. Yes, it is hard. Yes, you have to learn a lot of tools. Yes, you have to understand maths. But I just want everyone to remember it is 110% worth it, right? This is the current concentration of AI talent as we know it. You can see vast parts of the world that your potential for growth is huge. India, China are extremely large growing AI markets, and you want to have all the skills necessary. These are the titles that are commonly used for, I would say, the AI field. And I want to briefly explain each of these titles because there's a different sort of skill set that you need for each. So by far, the most general sort of person, or you will need to know the most if you're a data scientist, right? You have to know every part of it. You have to be able to make a model, put it in production, guide your engineering teams, etc. So there are some skills that are specific to that. often, let's say you are not interested in spending many years going into the depths of the maths. You are very okay becoming an ML engineer. So you can take a lot of your engineering knowledge, like TensorFlow, like Docker, things that you might have already done. Maybe you know Java. And you can work to make sure that an application is deployable and scalable, etc. There is a different skill set that is required for people who are data engineers. And let me explain the difference between like an ML engineer and a data engineer. When you are looking at any form of data, right, structured, unstructured, etc., you want to look at there is a specialized skill in how to find this data, how to pipeline it, how to distribute it so that it's available quickly. Like, just to give you an example, when you're watching a 4K video, let's say on YouTube, that video is not coming from one place. It has been distributed across the world on a content distribution network like Cloudflare, and it's being streamed to you. So that is the role of a data engineer, which is very different from an ML engineer whose job is to optimize production machine learning models. So I think it's in the name. Data engineers, you build pipelines to provide the data. ML engineers, you provide tools to optimize things that are running in production. There is a lot of specialized skill in deploying things. So for example, the app we saw as a demo is deployed on DigitalOcean. So, there is a role there for DevOps engineers. I have this little graph showing just the sort of requirements for each job role that I just showed you. So the highest sort of skills required in terms of software engineering is for DevOps. They are really deploying things at scale. And whereas the highest sort of machine learning skill is for ML research, and sort of data science comes somewhere as a generic middle ground. So looking at this, you can decide, like, if you really don't like the math of machine learning, there is no need to really go into it. You can definitely become an ML engineer, focus on it, learn the skills required for that, right? So that is why I said, don't be scared of this big thing that I showed you here, which has all the technologies, right? You don't need to learn everything, but it would be nice to know more and more over time. With that, I wanted to sort of transition to what technology I used to build this demo, and very briefly wrap up with some general opinions and some a good, I would say, use case. So just to build this demo that you today saw, and all of you of course played around with, I had to use all of these technologies. The machine learning app was trained and deployed using TensorFlow. The app was packaged up in Docker to be served using a DigitalOcean server. I use Postman to check the APIs. You can actually access it as an API. So if you build an app that needs to use this, you can go do it. It's being served using gUnicorn and Celery, right? So although the app looks very simple, there are just two screens. There is quite a bit of work that goes into it. And let me just explain why you need to put in that work, right? So while this app is running, you have noticed something. It takes a few seconds to infer it. When you upload the data, it will take a few seconds to process. Now there are 100 of you watching on this stream. If all of you hit this app together, and I encourage you to do it now, of course, there will be a lot of server load, right? So to deal with that, you have to send your task to queue, etc. So all of these technologies are not unnecessary. That is the thing that I'm trying to convey to you here. You have to keep all of this in mind to make sure that the app is scalable. You don't have to start with such a complex stack. You can start with something smaller, but bear in mind, at the end of the day, you want to learn as much as you can. So with that, I want to wrap up this presentation with one last sort of story. And this is a very interesting story of the first data scientists, right? The first data scientists were these people. They were fortune tellers. And that is how, and basically that's what we do, right? You try to examine. I'm not saying we are as inaccurate as fortune tellers, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to examine the data and make some predictions about the future. And that is where the value lies, right? You're trying to say, can the spread of COVID be stopped by X vaccine? Is this image offensive, etc., etc. So one of the very first people that did this was actually born many, many years ago, and his name was Jon Snow. And of course, he was not in Game of Thrones. He use data to first, and this is of course more interesting in these times because we are living in a pandemic. This is not the first pandemic humanity has faced. Way back when, in early London, London had a cholera epidemic. And what he did, he just collected data. He honestly just went and made a map of London and he started mapping where all the cholera cases are. So in this situation, you see the squares that are in black. He was like, oh, there's a cholera case here, here, here. So he was following the same principles that I told you earlier. He was doing data collection and data labeling, right? Then the next step, he was doing data analysis. He said, okay, these are where all the cholera victims are. These are where all the taps are. Why he collected taps? No reason. He just collected everything. He collected street signs, taps, interviewed a lot of people, just collected data first. And then he said, you know what? All of these diseases, of course, all of you can notice a pattern here, right? All of these diseases happen to center around this tap at Broad Street. So there must be something special about it. So he went and investigated. He made this heat map and he said, you know what? This tap is spreading cholera, and they shut down the tap, and cholera was brought under control. So this is a very powerful story. Before there was computers, before in 1854, using a pen and paper, somebody was able to use machine learning to make something that's actually very applicable. And to this day, the bar near that tap is called John Snow Bar, if you ever are in London. So what I wanted to share is, and this is an excellent book to read more about the story. Data science, machine learning is not new. We have a lot more tools. We have a lot more computing power, but the spirit of it is common. Go collect data, understand some simple algorithms, understand some complex algorithms, and try things. And that is all I want to leave you with. I hope this session was informative. Let me see if I can go through some of the questions that have come up towards the end and answer them very quickly. So one of the questions that Romil asks is, do data analysts have a scope in the world? I would say my personal take on that is data analysts are basically data scientists. It's just a small job title distinction. I would say maybe you need to know a little bit more programming if you're a scientist and less if you're an analyst. But no, there is definitely a lot of scope still for data analysts, and that's why I came up to the browser. I want to show you something. And recently, all of you might have experienced this yourself. The price of oil literally fell to the ground, right? So this is the price of Brent crude. It is fallen to nothing this year, if you look from a 5-year maximum. There is no physical reason this should happen. There is no, how can I call it? There is no real underlying motivation of why this should happen. But the reason this has happened is because there is, something that happens in the oil market that experts and data analysts usually know. So data analysts usually have a lot of domain knowledge, and they are looking at the data. They're looking at, okay, oil storage is reducing, etc. But they're also bringing their expertise. So there is definitely a place for data analysts. Some of the skills that you need for data analysts are Tableau and Excel. You should know how to script Excel. So there is definitely a place. Having said that, there is very little difference between a data scientist and a data analyst. So I wouldn't focus too much on those job titles. Okay, if there are any more questions, please ask it on either chat. And while I wait for questions, I can show you examples of where data science has failed badly or how it can fail. So here is an example of Google flu trends. The last time there was a major disease going around, which was the H1N1 epidemic. So basically every year, the CDC, or Central for Disease Control, comes up with a prediction of how many people have influenza, right? So, of course, it takes a lot of time for them to compile the numbers. So Google said, what if we took everybody that was typing into Google search for flu symptoms and made a prediction? And you can see they were very, very accurate. 2009, they were extremely accurate. 2010, 2012, okay, accurate. And then suddenly, they were extremely inaccurate in 2013. Can anyone guess what happened in 2013? the bird flu epidemic hit. So people started searching for flu, and as you can see, the model went horribly wrong. So that is what can happen if you don't control and monitor your data. Okay, I have one more question that has come up. I'm going to go to that, and let's see if we can answer that. How to map unstructured text to structured text using machine learning? Any solution? Yes. So one of the ways that you can take unstructured text and map it is usually to use some kind of a model. So WordNet is usually the most common, and I'm trying to find you the interactive WordNet that is extremely interesting to look at. But yeah, you can basically search through this. So there are many ways that text can be compressed into some feature representation, and WordNet is one of the things. So you take your unstructured text and you start, as you can see, you can go play around here. So you take that and you start mapping it to this feature space using a neural network, and then you can connect these feature spaces. So yes, there are many ways. BERT is also a very common model, BERT, that is used to map unstructured text into some feature space, and then you can proceed to do some classification. Any more questions? Okay, somebody wants my email address. That is here. I'm going to put it up. Please email me. It's hello at my first name, my last name. Please feel free to email me, introduce yourself. I am very happy to respond and answer questions. Do we have more questions? Okay, my time here is running out. I'm very happy to, of course, do more sessions, especially people who want to see how the app was coded and go through the code. Again, feel free to email me and maybe we can have another stream at another time. And if you have any questions, also please feel free to ask.
Yeah,
Hello.
thank you, Shaunak.
Hello.
I think the session was really nice and the participants have enjoyed it quite a lot. Shaunak, you can hear me?
Yeah. So, thank you so much. I'm very happy that the session was constructive.
Okay, fine. Okay, now I request IEEE Student Branch Joint Treasurer.
Hello everyone. On behalf of the entire organizing team, it's my privilege to say a big thank you to our speaker, Dr. Shaunak Dey, who has delivered the webinar on industrial machine learning, considerations and opportunities in his best possible way. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. I request our audience to kindly check the comment section box for the feedback form and fill it within an hour or so to get your e-certificates. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants, the faculty, students and all those who helped in making this webinar a great success. Thank you one and all.
This webinar was all about learning for oneself and sharing the knowledge with others. I hope we have been instrumental in doing so. I request a few of our participants to provide their valuable feedback about 6-day webinar series. Firstly, I call upon Professor Ajay Dhruva, Assistant Professor at Vidyalankar Institute of Technology, Mumbai, to kindly share his thoughts.
Thank you for introducing me. I will take this opportunity to thank IEEE Bombay Center and IEEE Student Branch for organizing such a wonderful session. The session started right where Dr. Sangeeta image forensics helped us in solving doubts related to image processing. Then we also loved the session by Dr. Amit, who introduced us to data analytics, data science. Then we were driven into the journey of wireless network, the different tools that were used, and the different IoE and IoT make our lives simpler. That session was also nicely delivered by Dr. Saurabh Mehta. Then we were taken into the field of microelectronics by Dr. Satyanarayanan. And then moving on to the galaxy of satellite image processing by Dr. Vaishnav. We really weren't aware of a lot of things in satellite image processing, but her lecture really helped us in knowing the fundamentals and some tools related to satellite image processing. And lastly, the session was concluded by Dr. Shaunak Dey. He also very well explained the topics in a very easy manner of machine learning and AI. So I would also make a mention that I have interacted with all the six speakers in the past, and it was a privilege to again hear all of them through this webinar series. The takeaway of this session is that since we are into the teaching fraternity, the knowledge that has been added to our knowledge base will definitely be passed on to our students. So somewhere, sometime in our lives, these talks will definitely help us, and it has motivated us in this quarantine session. So once again, thank you everyone. I would also like to thank the management of the teachers and the students who were at the back end and managing everything, right from sending us emails, reminding us of the session, sending us e-certificates. So very nicely done. Once again, I would like to thank Don Bosco Goa, IEEE student branch, IEEE Mumbai section, and the entire team for having such a very good webinar series for us. It was really a nice session, very informative, very crisp, very short, and to the point. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Professor Achay. We shall now hear from Professor Mario Pinto, Assistant Professor at Goa College of Engineering, his experience about this event Tech Insight. Over to you, Mario.
Hi. Hi, Yashudas. Thanks for getting me on this forum. Hi, all. This is Mario Pinto, Assistant Professor from Goa College of Engineering. First of all, I would like to congratulate the IEEE Student Chapter, Don Bosco College of Engineering, for having organizing this wonderful webinar series of 6 days, which I was also a part. Great effort has been put forward by this team of DVC. Thanks to the coordinator of this full entire webinar series, Mr. Yeshudas, who has taken a lot of pain in organizing this event. I would like to thank and share my few insights about this webinar series. All the speakers were too good right from the day one, that is on 20th. We had image forensic, wherein we got to know about the different techniques of forensic techniques about the image, followed by on 21st we had data science and data analytics. There also the speaker spoke about the different techniques which can be used, followed by on 22nd wireless network simulation tools. Then on 26th microelectronics in India, 27th we had satellite image processing, and today we had machine learning. All the topics were chosen very well. Good speakers were brought. In fact, though we are working in this particular field of computers, but many things we did not know, which I got to know after joining this webinar. One good thing about this webinar is the duration was good enough, and the speakers were kind enough to explain all the points that were raised by the participants. Well coordinated event, and my knowledge, particularly in terms of wireless network simulations and the image forensic, has increased. We have gained a lot. Once again, I would like to thank everyone, all the speakers, all the coordinators, all the students who have worked very hard in making sure that this event has become successful. Once again, a very big thank you to IEEE Student Chapter, Don Bosco College of Engineering, all the organizing team, all the faculty members, their principal, and all the associates who helped to make this event a very good success. I wish the IEEE Student Chapter to come up with some more topics of such interest, and many faculties will get benefit from this. Once again, thank you and all the best.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Maria. That was so nice to hear it from you.
Thank you.
Before we conclude, I request our HOD, Dr. Varsha Turkar, to kindly say a few words.
Good afternoon everyone. Today is the last day of the webinar series organized by our IEEE student branch, which is an initiative of Department of ETC. I am happy to inform you that we got very good response for all sessions. Professor Yeshudas and our students have really worked hard to make this event a big success. I am grateful to our director, Father Kinley Cruz, and Principal Dr. Nina Panandikar for their support, the IEEE Bombay section for being there with us, and our system support staff, Mr. Romeo and Mr. Ignatius, without whom it would not have been possible to organize this webinar. I am also thankful to all the participants and resource persons. I hope this webinar series was instrumental in enhancing your skills and knowledge in various domains.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words of appreciation and for your unflinching support and motivation in organizing this webinar series. We have been fortunate to be assisted by you. I wish to express my gratitude towards the eminent speakers of the webinar series, Dr. Sangeeta, Dr. Amiya, Dr. Saurabh, Dr. Satyanarayana, Dr. Varsha, and Dr. Shaunak for taking out valuable time of their schedule and enlightening us with their knowledge and expertise. Special thanks to our IEEE Student Branch Exicom members, Mr. Ranvik, Mr. Gautam, Ms. Neha, Ms. Crystal, Mr. Suyo, Mr. Shivam, subcommittee members, Mr. Musab, Mr. Satiswarup, and Mrs. Sherwin. Though I am seen on screen, these students have worked tirelessly off screen. Right from designing posters, brochure, certificates, sending emails every day, checking if everyone had received their certificates, introducing resource persons, writing reports, etc. Thank you once again for your exuberance and diligence. With this, we sign off from Tech Insight webinar series, season 1. Till then, stay home, stay safe.